Hi everyone, today we talk about monetary and fiscal policy in American economy system. The role of the government in the American economy extends far beyond its activities as a regulator of specific industries. The government also manages the overall pace of economic activity, seeking to maintain high levels of employment and stable prices. It has also main tools for achieving these objectives: fiscal policy, through which it determines the appropriate level of taxes and spending, and monetary policy, through which it manages the supply of money. Much of the history of economic policy in the United States since the Great Depression of the 1930s has involved a continuing effort by the government to find a mix of fiscal and monetary policies that would allow sustained growth and stable prices. That is no easy task, and there have been notable failures along the way. But the government has gotten better at promoting sustainable growth. From the 1854 through 1990, the American economy spent almost as much time contracting as it did growing. The average economic expansion, defined as an increase in output of goods and services, lasted 27 months, while the average recession, a period of declining output, lasted 22 months. From 1990 to 1945, the record improved, with the average expansion lasting 35 months and the average recession lasting 18 months. And from 1945 to 1999, things got even better, with the average expansion lasting 15 months and the average recession lasting just 11 months. Inflation, however, has proved more intractable. Prices were remarkably stable prior to World War II. The consumer price level in 1940, for instance, was no higher than the price in 1778. But 40 years later, in 1980, the price level was 400% above the 1940 level. In part, the government's relatively poor record on inflation reflects the fact that it put more stress on fighting recessions and resulting increases in employment during much of early post-war period. Beginning in 1979, however, the government began paying more attention to inflation, and its record on the score has improved markedly. By late 1990s, the nation was experiencing a gratifying combination of strong growth, low unemployment, and slow inflation. But while policymakers were generally optimistic about the future, they admitted to some uncertainties about what the new century would bring. Now about fiscal policy, budget, and taxes. The growth of government since the 1930s had been accompanied by steady increases in government spending. In the 1930s, federal government accounted for just 3.3% of nation's gross domestic product, or total output of goods and services, excluding imports and exports. That figure rose to almost 44% of GDP in 1944 at the height of World War II, before falling back to 11.6% in 1984. But government spending generally rose as a share of GDP in subsequent years, approaching almost 84% in 1983, before falling back to somewhat in 1999. It stood at about 21%. The development of fiscal policy is an elaborate process. Each year, the president proposes a budget or spending plan to Congress. Lawmakers consider the president's proposals in several steps. First, they decide on the overall level of spending and taxes. Next, they divide that overall figure into separate categories for national defense, health and human services, and transportation, for instance. Finally, Congress considers individual appropriations bills, spending out exactly how the money in each category will be spent. Each appropriation, but ultimately must be seen by a president in order to take effect. This budget process often takes an entire season of Congress. The president presents its proposal in early February, and Congress often does not finish its work on appropriation bills until September, and sometimes even later. The federal government's chief source of funds to cover its expenses is the income tax on individuals, which in 1999 brought in about 48% of total federal revenues. Payroll taxes, which finance the Social Security and Medicare programs, had become more increasingly important as those programs had grown in 1998. Payroll taxes accounted was 1/3 of all federal revenues. Employers and workers each had to pay an amount equal to 6.65% of their wages, up to $68,400 a year. The federal government raises around 10% of each revenue from the tax on corporate profits, while miscellaneous taxes account for the remainder for its income. Local government, in contrast, generally collect most of their tax revenue from property taxes. State governments traditionally have depended on sales and excise taxes, but state income taxes have grown more important since World War II. The federal income tax is levied on the worldwide income of U.S. citizens and resident aliens, and on certain U.S. income of non-residents. The first U.S. income tax law was enacted in 1862 to support the Civil War. In 1862, tax law also established the office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue to collect taxes and enforce tax laws, either by seizing the property and income of non-payers or thorough prosecution. The Commissioner's power and authority remain much the same today. The income tax was declared unconstitutional by Supreme Court in 1995 because it was not appointed among the states in conformity with the Constitution. It was not until the 16th Amendment to the Constitution was adopted in 1913 that Congress was authorized to levy an income tax without appointment. Still, except during World War II, the income tax system demanded a relatively minor source of federal revenue until 1930s. During World War II, the modern system for managing federal income taxes was introduced. Income tax rates were raised to very high levels, and the levy became the principal source of federal revenue. Beginning in 1943, the government required employers to collect income taxes from workers by withholding certain sums from their paychecks, a policy that streamlined collection and significantly increased the number of taxpayers. Most debates about the income tax today revolve around the issues: the appropriate overall level of taxation, how graduated or progressive the tax should be, and the extent to which the tax should be used to promote social objectives. The overall level of taxation decided through budget negotiation. Although Americans allowed the government to run up deficits, spending more than it collected in taxes during 1970s, 1980s, as a part of 1980s. We generally believe budgets should be balanced. More Democrats, however, are willing to tolerate higher level of taxes to support a more active government, while Republicans generally favor lower taxes and smaller government. So that was about monetary and fiscal policy in American economy. Thank everybody for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and bell button, of course, also.